All right, welcome to this Stampscapes show and tell. I have something, I don't know, as far as Stampscapes goes, it's kind of, I don't know, whatever, unusual or just something that I haven't seen in quite a while. Okay, so these are some stamps that I gave to my mom. She used to do some stamping, but she doesn't really do it anymore, so she gave me back all of the stamps that I had given her. She says, Kevin, you can probably figure out something to do with these, whatever. But these are going back to like the real early days of Stampscapes. Some of these stamps here, have been long since been discontinued. This one was discontinued for a while, then I brought it back because, I don't know, people were using it that had bought it in the first couple years of Stampscapes. But something like this, Tree-Lined Hills, I discontinued that one early on. It was meant to kind of go on the side. You can see where it kind of goes on the side of this canyon like this, where you can merge them, to make a kind of a larger scene if you're doing a postcard like this way, or a standard card size, and you need a little bit of space on each side. But this is not only the tree-lined hills, but it's a wood-mounted version of it, and it also has this cushion in here. So in the early days of Stampscapes, or just, it really could be anywhere along the line. I kind of stabilized my sources at one point in time, but finding things like wood manufacture that was really consistent, and the prices were stable too. It was really tough. I switched probably wood manufacturers about maybe 6 or 7 times in the lifetime of Stampscapes. And that was when, everyone was using wood-mounted stamps, and that was probably through about, I don't know, 2000 or so. I mean, people are still using them and buying them a little bit, but it's mostly unmounted stamps these days. So wood was the first one that was really difficult to find. You can see the profiles of, well, I don't know. These are all pretty similar, so I was probably getting all of these ones from the same place, but you can see this one's a little bit more kind of hourglass shape. That's typically how they would describe this shape right here. This one right here, Eagle Valley Woodworks or something like that, I think. I think that was this one right here. And I've gone through other ones where it was more of a straight edge, but each side was beveled, and you used to purchase it by how many sides you want beveled. It was a 4 side, 8 side, that started getting really expensive, but that was like a really expensive process for them to do that type of thing, because I don't know, it was probably hand doing it, and just laying the side, into a sander or something like that for a few seconds. They're working with larger sticks too. I don't know, maybe a 36-inch stick or something like that. But then they got to cut it down and do all those other bevels like that. Okay, but the second thing that was always difficult to find until I really found a really good source for many, many years was cushion, okay? So this one right here is an unusual cushion that I didn't use for too long, but it was fairly resilient, and it still is, but it was white, not the, ideal color for us stampers, because it would stain, okay? But, I was looking around for my typical 16th inch black cushioning, or they called it tape, and this one was actually foam right here. Okay, so there was a little bit of different terminology, but different manufacturers used different types. The most common one was this 1/8 inch gray one that was like super, super sticky, and a lot of people use that one. Some of them were a little bit more resilient than others. Some of them that were denser. If you kind of compressed it for a while, let's say if you shipped something off somewhere or you were storing it somewhere, it might compress the cushion where it wouldn't bounce back as easily, because it was full of adhesive on the interior. Where these other types, the adhesive on both sides kind of was lot more surface oriented. It wasn't soaking into the interior there, leaving it prone to, I don't know what you call it, memory or something like that, where it's just not resilient. I forgot. There was different types of terminology for this type of thing, and the rate at which something springs back is one of those ratings. Okay, but we have some of the eighth inch here. This one right here was a 16th inch. This 16th inch one was really easy to trim, and it was one of the better trimming foams because you can, really cut it very crisply and without a lot of adhesive residue on your scissors, which is another big thing when you're doing hand stamped products like this and you're cutting all these things out like that. Other companies use scroll saws to cut around on things like this. We always used scissors and, kind of the larger Fiskars scissors. Okay, but another thing with these types of wood stamps like this and hand indexing, which was being done by most companies at the time, except for when Hero Art started using labels to go on your wood. So this one right here is an example of a label, just placed on the top. Perfect indexing every time, but you had to buy these labels in rolls of 1,000. I used 2 labels like this early on because sometimes you'd go to a store out in, I don't know, Arizona or something like that in a hotter environment where on a stamp this size, there's a lot more expansion and contraction due to the whatever relative arid, humidity in an area. And if it was really arid in a certain area with larger stamps like this, 3 by 4.5, or larger, I'm not just talking about Stampscapes, but any company, you'd get a lot of contraction from a natural surface like that. So sometimes if it was a wraparound style of label, you get this. The label, the wood shrinks, but the label doesn't. So you'd get like a big, like, I don't know what you call it, like a wave in the label where it shrunk down. You see this kind of lifted line, and the edges where you wrapped around the label that would have, the name of the company out here and the name of the stamp, sometimes those would be sprung up like that. So I used to teach all around the country, and I'd see that, and that's why I chose this, so that if there's contraction right here, you wouldn't get that springing out. I later switched to the full wraparound like this, and it just was really careful to really get that adhered like that. And plus, it was just too hard with the different label companies. You'd order whatever, 3,000 of this side and 3,000 of this, and then you'd run out of, one or the other, where they just weren't really being very honest with you in terms of what they were supplying to you. So it was never kind of equal in terms of, the code and, top indexing label. All right, so with the woods like this, with the early days of early inks, there were different inks that people used, but there weren't too many different types. I'm guessing there were probably about 5 different types, and they were sold by 1 or 2 different companies out there to do that indexing on the top. And if you'd index directly on top of just bare wood, if it was the wrong type of ink, or if it was like hotter, like during the summer months or something like that, that can make a big difference because you get these inks running in the grain there. So what I used to have to do on all this wood, we'd get, hundreds and thousands of pieces of wood in there, all different sizes. This is the label on here, but just for an example, you would lay these out in trays, and then what I would do is I would take like a Krylon crystal clear or something like that, and I would seal the surfaces with these a little bit. I wouldn't do a big shellacking or anything like that, but it would close in the pores at least enough to where this ink isn't running in the grain. And like I said, it really made a big difference if it's, between like winter or something like that and summer, or the time of day that you were doing it. So a lot of times I did my indexing at nighttime, so that that ink was a little bit more stable and would, kind of situate itself within the grain and on the surface, before it really had a chance to run. And it wasn't really, any of these types of industrial inks weren't the types to dry really fast. So I would give it, several hours to dry typically, and then I would take them outside again, and I would put another layer of Krylon sealant over the top of it, probably crystal clear at the time back then. But later on, we switched to labels because there was a lot of indexing, and the way that you would index is you would have one just, indexing stamp, and then you would ink it up, and hopefully you got a really good even coat. And then the way I did it was I had something really stiff, like I forgot what it is, but it was like an edge of a board or something like that. And you put your stamp like this, and then you run them together like this. So you have one edge here, so it's not going to move one way or another. And you go like that, and you bring these two together. And sometimes I just go like this, but sometimes you just kind of press into it like that. And then you just pray that you got a really good impression. So there was a lot of times when some area didn't stamp or something like that. So you have that guideline, and you would go like this again, and you'd hit that area a little bit more. And sometimes you got, perfect registration where it hit it again. But even if you were off like a 64th of an inch, you're going to have a blurred image, and then you couldn't really use that one. So I don't know. A lot of times we just toss those out. Or I save those pieces for the Huntington Beach Stamp Club. I would go there with a bunch of things, and my mistake indexing pieces, and people would use those for, I don't know, their own mounting, because anytime people bought unmounted stamps back then, they'd mount it on wood. All right, so I don't know, maybe they did the sanding or something like that, where I just didn't have the time to do that. Or if you had a stamp like this one right here, this mount that's equal on both sides, if you had another stamp that can cover that up, then you had this other side to index. So if it was like something like one of my sky images, like a Milky Way or something like that, that's a full rectangle, you can index that side, and if you got a good indexing of it, then you can just cover this up completely with that stamp, and you wouldn't be able to see that mistake indexing whatsoever. Like if this was right here, if that piece of rubber was on this, over this whole thing, it's going to be invisible, and there's no way that this cushion is ever going to come off from this. So it was perfectly fine. You couldn't see it at all, and it wasn't wasting the wood. Or I don't know. Like I said, I didn't waste it, but I just donate it. Okay, so anyways, going forward, after I switched labels, they started going with there was this new ink that came out that was called soy ink. It was a soy-based ink of some sort, and that gave really, really good impressions. It had really good consistency and stability, in terms of temperature, and a lot of people use that. But some people had these things called pad printers, and it was this kind of almost this press type of thing, and that solved a lot of the indexing issues from there. I saw that once at Judykins being used. So, but by that time I had already switched to labels, just so I wouldn't have to worry about that anymore. Because indexing these pieces like this, that was the hardest part to making a really good wood-mounted stamp back in the day. And things like this with all these little tiny dots like that, getting that stamped out with a really good even impression, it was crazy sometimes. And sometimes when you got on a roll, it was just like, okay, you gotta just keep doing it and just doing a bunch of them all at the same time. So back then, you'd do like 20 of these or something like this, or more. If it was a real popular image, you'd do more of them. But in applying that pressure too, you got the feeling of where to add most of your pressure on the stamp, to get that ideal impression. It's what we do still, when you're inking these up and stamping it on a piece of paper. There's certain areas of it, like right here on this one. I mean, this one's really small. It's not going to require a lot of pressure, but up here there's more mass, so you want to press up here and not press down here so much, when you're applying your pressure. So I'd hold it up here, or when I'm stamping this out, I have my finger up here giving that pressure. A little bit more extreme version when you're stamping into kind of a porous surface like that, even though it's been spray sealed and sealed off to some extent. But anyways, it's just kind of interesting seeing these. Sometimes I see these, cushions like this, or a hand index stamp on eBay. And I didn't save any of these. I had one at some point in time, But I might save one of these, but all of these will be on some auction here pretty soon when I get it posted. But I don't know. Interesting seeing these again. And every one of the hand-indexed ones, I didn't have anyone else doing that because it was just too specialized a process back in the day. But every hand-index stamp in Stampscapes, I did. Unless someone bought like an unmounted stamp and indexed their own thing, which I've seen, you know, for sale up on eBay too. It's rare to see it though. Okay, but anyways, little show and tell, going back in time, 93, 94, maybe 95, but I'm guessing around that time is when I switched from that to the labels and made my life much easier. Okay, thanks for watching.